Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I built my dream backyard, a pool, a pergola, a bar, I expected barbecues, not a turf war. But when strangers from the neighboring HOA started swimming in my private pool, claiming it was theirs, I realized this wasn't a summer party. It was the start of an all-out suburban battle. I had just finished welding the last steel bracket on the outdoor grill when the sun began to dip below the tree line, casting a soft amber glow over my backyard masterpiece. I stood back, wiping the sweat from my brow with a rag that had seen more concrete dust than daylight, and admired the scene: the stone grotto with its built-in waterfall feature, the custom concrete pool that curved like a river bend, the cedar pergola, the high-end bar I poured a month of weekends into. I'd built dam bridges in my time, but nothing gave me the same satisfaction as this backyard. It wasn't just a pool, it was a statement, a place to celebrate, to unwind, to shut the world out. That Saturday night was the big debut. I threw a pool party for my friends, family, some loyal clients. It was the first time I'd had this many people over since I bought the place last year. 40-something guests, all with drinks in hand, steaks sizzling, kids cannonballing into the deep end, and the Bluetooth speakers humming old-school rock. I stood there with a plate of ribs, laughing with my cousin Ray, when he nodded toward the back fence and said, "Hey, who's the Barbie doll watching us from the trees?" I didn't think much of it. I figured some neighbor was curious. My property borders a stretch of woods that leads up to Willowvale Estates, an upscale HOA nightmare I deliberately stayed clear of when house hunting. The fence line runs just shy of their manicured hedges, and mine is the last house before it turns rural. Still, that night went down smooth, and I went to bed smelling like smoke, sunscreen, and good bourbon. Next morning, I stumbled outside with a mug of coffee and an old ball cap, planning to start cleaning up. That's when I saw the splashing. At first, I thought I'd forgotten someone in the pool overnight. Then I saw them, two women I didn't recognize, lounging in my pool chairs like they owned stock in them. 4 kids, maybe 5, were already in the water, squealing like they were at a public rec center. I blinked. "Excuse me," one of the women looked up casually, like I was the one intruding. "Oh hey, we're just using the pool real quick. Karen said it's community access. We're from Willowvale." I stared at them, the steam from my coffee rising like cartoon disbelief. "Karen who?" "Karen Hutchings," the other said brightly. "HOA president. She said this pool was part of the shared greenbelt." We got the code to the gate. I walked over, set down my mug, and looked at my side gate. Sure enough, the industrial-grade padlock I installed last spring was gone, replaced with a shiny brass number I'd never seen. My private property, no trespassing sign was ripped off the post and lying face down in the bushes. Nearby, on one of my outdoor tables, was a laminated flyer with the HOA logo at the top. I picked it up. Willowvale shared amenities, backyard pool open, Saturday to Sunday 9 to 6. I let out a laugh that came out more like a cough. "All right, time to pack up." One of the moms raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You're trespassing. This is my land. That pool? I built it. No one's allowed here unless I invite them personally. Karen gave you bad information." The first woman stood up, clearly offended. "Well, that's not what Karen said. She said it's part of the HOA plan. We even have this map." She reached into a beach bag and pulled out a folded color printout as if this was a city council meeting and she was about to motion for a vote. I didn't even glance at it. "I'm not part of Willowvale. Never was. This house predates your HOA by 30 years. I own every square inch up to that creek out back. Now, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to gather your stuff and leave, or I'm calling the police." The kids were already getting out, towels dragging behind them like war flags. The women muttered something about bad attitude and going to report this, but they packed up and left through the side gate like a retreating army. I followed them to make sure they didn't leave anything or try to lift anything. Once they were gone, I grabbed my phone and called the police. Not 911, just the non-emergency line. I explained the trespassing, the lock being swapped, the sign being torn down. Dispatcher said they'd send someone by. While I waited, I walked the property again. That new lock wasn't just random. It was keyed, numbered, probably mass-issued. The gate itself had no signs of forced entry. Someone had deliberately cut my lock and replaced it with their own. And the laminated flyer, professionally printed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a coordinated action. When the officer finally arrived, I showed him everything: the flyer, the lock, the torn sign, and the HOA map the lady left behind. He was sympathetic, but cautious. Well, if you're saying someone broke the lock and encouraged others to use the pool, that could be criminal mischief, maybe criminal trespass if it happens again. You know who Karen Hutchings is? Oh yeah, I said. And she's about to know who I am too. He nodded. Best thing to do is document everything. Replace the lock again. Maybe install some cameras if you don't already have them. Oh, I will, I said. And next time, I won't be the one making the call. By the time he left, I had a plan forming. Because if this woman thought she could annex my property like it was some lost colony of Willow Vale, she was about to learn that I build foundations for a living, and I don't shake easy. It didn't take long. By that same afternoon, I was elbow-deep in cement mix, working on re-anchoring the lock post for the side gate, when I heard tires crunching up the gravel drive. 2 police cruisers, both uninvited. I wiped my hands, thinking maybe they were following up on the trespassers from earlier. I was wrong. Stepping out like she was arriving for a real estate tour came Karen Hutchings, HOA president, dressed in crisp beige slacks, a powder blue blouse, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my lawnmower. She held a thick leather folder and a smile like she'd already won a battle I didn't know we were fighting. Behind her stood a uniformed officer, trying his best to look neutral. The second officer hung back, arms crossed, clearly skeptical of the whole show. Mr. Malone, Karen said, striding up like she was the damn sheriff. We need to have a conversation. I crossed my arms, jaw clenched. You must be Karen. I figured we'd meet eventually. She gave a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I was informed you had an incident this morning involving some of our residents attempting to use what is, according to our documents, a shared recreational facility. My nostrils flared. You mean my private pool, on my private land, behind my private fence? She held up a plastic-sleeved map like it was a sacred text. According to the original site planning documents from 2003, this section, she pointed to a shaded blue area that encompassed a sliver of my property, was designated as part of the Willow Vale Greenbelt Zone, which includes all recreational structures erected within that boundary. I raised an eyebrow. You trying to tell me this pool, which I poured and built less than 8 months ago, is somehow part of your master plan from 2 decades ago? The officer stepped between us slightly, palm up. Okay, let's keep this civil. Mr. Malone, this is a bit outside of typical neighborhood disputes. If there's a question about property lines, maybe the county needs to verify boundaries. Funny you mention that, I said, already walking toward my porch. I came back with a black binder full of laminated copies, the property deed, the site survey from the licensed land engineer I hired when I bought the place, the building permits, and the pool inspection records. All stamped, all approved. Not a single mention of Willow Vale Estates or its HOA. Karen didn't even blink. Those may be recent documents, but the HOA bylaws supersede when common areas were originally planned. You may have built the pool illegally. Illegally? I barked out a laugh. Lady, I'm not even in your HOA. My land isn't in your subdivision. I'm not subject to your bylaws. You can't just draw a circle on a napkin and declare it a sovereign state. She bristled, but didn't back down. You are causing confusion and distress in the neighborhood. There have been multiple reports of noise, excessive lighting, and unauthorized gatherings. We are obligated to enforce community standards. The cop raised a hand again. Okay, let's all take a breath. I took one this morning, I snapped. And it smelled like chlorine and bullshit. Karen's tone turned frosty. If you continue to deny access to HOA members, we'll have no choice but to escalate this through legal means. We've already scheduled a hearing with the zoning board to contest your pool's legitimacy. I took a slow step forward, making sure she had no doubt I wasn't going to be steamrolled. You can escalate all you want, but I'm telling you right now, if one more person sets foot on my land without my permission, they're not leaving with dry clothes or clean records. She stared at me, lips pinched, then turned to the officer. I trust you've documented this? He nodded, clearly uncomfortable. We'll file the visit, but at this point, it's a civil matter. Karen turned on her heel and strode back to her car. As she opened the door, she called out, "You'll be hearing from our legal team." I smiled. Good. I've got one too, and she hates bullies. As the cars rolled away, I stood at the gate with my arms crossed, staring at the replaced lock I'd just sealed in concrete. That woman wasn't just entitled, she was delusional. And worse, she had a clipboard and a sense of mission, which meant this wasn't over, not even close. By midweek, I thought the madness had peaked. The lock was back in place, the cameras were up, and I figured maybe, just maybe, Karen had gotten the message. I was wrong, so spectacularly wrong, I almost admired the sheer insanity of what came next. It started on a Tuesday morning with a ping on my phone. A buddy of mine who works in IT and lives over in Willow Vale sent me a link. "Bro, check this out," was all he wrote. The link took me to the Willow Vale Community Facebook group. Private, of course, but someone had leaked screenshots. Right there, in full color and high resolution, was a doctored map with my backyard highlighted in baby blue and labeled Seasonal Shared Pool, Community Use Encouraged. There was a caption too, written by none other than Karen Hutchings herself. A beautiful amenity, previously underutilized, now reconnected with the community as originally intended by Willow Vale's founders. Residents are welcome to enjoy the pool on weekends. Access code available upon request. Let's enjoy summer the way it was meant to be. My jaw dropped. Reconnected. Founders. Lady, this isn't a Roman aqueduct. It's a concrete hole I paid for in blood, sweat, and invoice receipts. And now she was advertising it like a goddamn HOA timeshare. Before I could even finish cursing, the first knock came, then another. I looked through the peephole. An elderly couple, lawn chairs in hand, dressed like they were headed to a resort. I opened the door with a polite smile and said, "You're at the wrong house." They looked confused. "Isn't this the Willow Vale shared pool?" "Nope," I said. "This is the Malone property. Private, as in not yours." The old man frowned. But Karen said, "I don't care what Karen said. Unless she built this pool and pays my water bill, it's not hers to offer." They shuffled off, muttering about rudeness and what's the world coming to. But it didn't stop. That afternoon, 3 teenage boys tried climbing over the fence with towels and floaties. I caught them on camera and blasted a warning through the speaker system. "This is private property. Leave now, or police will be called." They bolted like they'd seen a ghost, which was exactly what I wanted. By Wednesday, I had dozens of incidents recorded. People at the gate, angry phone calls from HOA members. How they got my number, I don't know. Even a woman who shouted at my gardener that he had no right to block community access. I installed motion-activated sirens. I zip-tied metal no trespassing private land signs in 3 languages to the gate and fence. I even added an LED floodlight that clicked on like a prison searchlight the moment someone stepped within 10 feet of the pool gate. But the kicker came Thursday morning, when I found an official-looking notice taped to my front door. Failure to provide community access to designated shared spaces may result in administrative action and fines. Refusal to comply with HOA standards reflects poorly on neighborhood cohesion and will be escalated. No logo, no signature, just bold font and arrogance. That was the last straw. I called up McKinley & Dorsey, a local land surveying firm that specializes in property line disputes, and told them I needed a full site survey and zoning analysis. Stat. Within 24 hours, they were out with drones, blueprints, and equipment. The lead surveyor, a no-nonsense woman named Erica, confirmed what I already knew. Your lot is a self-contained non-HOA parcel, zoned residential, privately owned, no public easements, no shared greenbelt obligations. That map they're using, total fiction. We got it in writing, certified, notarized, sealed. I uploaded it online and posted it to my own public Facebook page with the caption, "To all Willow Vale residents trying to swim in my pool this weekend, bring a warrant or bring floaties. You'll need one to survive the other." It got shared over 3,000 times in 24 hours. Local Facebook groups blew up. The HOA's own page started getting flooded with angry comments, memes, and screenshots of Karen's fraudulent map. And then the threatening messages started. Some HOA diehards claimed I was depriving families of access. Others promised administrative consequences or said I was creating a legal liability by denying previously allowed usage. My favorite was from some guy named Jeff T., who said, "You'll be hearing from our lawyer. You're not bigger than the community." I replied with a gif of a bulldozer running over a lawn chair. But under the sarcasm, I knew things were getting serious. This wasn't just HOA delusion, it was coordinated, calculated, and getting bolder by the day. So I did what any reasonable man with a stubborn streak and a few hundred gigabytes of security footage would do. I started building a legal case. Karen wanted a war over a swimming pool. I was ready to drag the entire HOA underwater with her. Saturday morning hit with the kind of sticky heat Savannah's known for, thick, oppressive, and humming with mosquitoes that move like they're late for something. I was on my back deck finishing a second cup of coffee, watching the mist burn off the pool when the sound of voices snapped me out of the moment. I heard footsteps, more than a few. I stood up and saw them, 4 men in matching gray shirts with Willow Vale Grounds Unit embroidered in block letters. 2 carried long-handled pool nets, 1 had a toolkit, and the last was hauling a 6-foot aluminum ladder like he was about to rewire a damn warehouse. They marched up my side path like it was business as usual. I stepped forward, blocking the walkway. "You fellas lost." The guy in front, tall with a clipboard and an earpiece he clearly didn't need, looked me straight in the eye. "We're here for scheduled maintenance. Pool cleaning, safety check, pump calibration. Karen Hutchings sent us." I let out a sharp laugh. "Karen, you're on Malone land now, not HOA territory. You've got 5 seconds to turn around before this gets real unpleasant." The man didn't budge. "Sir, this is standard procedure. The HOA has authority to maintain shared use assets. You're interfering with a scheduled service." He said it like he practiced in the mirror. "Let me rephrase," I said, slowly pulling my phone out and pointing it directly at the guy's smug face. "You're trespassing. You've entered my property without permission, you're impersonating a contractor, and you've got tools in your hand. That's intent. I've got cameras, witnesses, and a sprinkler system with a hair trigger. Behind me, the motion sensors chirped and clicked into life. One of the guys glanced nervously at the light blinking above the floodlight mount. Another looked toward the gate, probably wondering how fast he could sprint back to the van. But the leader stayed stone-faced. We were given authorization by HOA to perform site services. "If you have an issue, take it up with them." "Buddy," I said, "the only service getting performed today is law enforcement dragging your crew off my lawn." Right on cue, the loud click of my side gate echoed, and a 5th figure appeared. Karen herself, in a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, as if she were inspecting vineyards instead of crashing someone's backyard. "Mr. Malone," she called out, waving a manila folder like it was a holy relic. "We're well within our rights. The revised amenity schedule is live, and this crew is operating under HOA Order Number 71-D. Slowly turned to face her. "Karen, you just authorized a team of unlicensed workers to climb fences and tamper with private infrastructure on property you don't own. That's a felony in this state." She didn't flinch. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. We can resolve this amicably. You broke my gate lock, entered my land, and tried to service a pool like it's a Marriott courtyard. That's not amicable. That's criminal." I turned the camera toward the guy with the ladder, just as he tried to force open the latch on the filter housing. "Congratulations, champ," I said. "You just committed vandalism on camera." He froze. Karen's face twitched. Somewhere behind me, the first siren wailed in the distance. I'd already called the police. Twice. The crew started backing away fast. The tall guy with the clipboard dropped it. One of the others muttered, "She said it was community land," and made a beeline for the truck. The police arrived within minutes, 2 patrol cars, and an officer I recognized from the previous incident. His expression shifted from irritation to surprise the moment he saw the ladder guy trying to hide the toolkit behind a bush. I handed over my phone, the folder, the flyer Karen had passed out last week, and the new footage from my security cameras. The lead officer turned to the crew and said simply, "Line up." Karen, now visibly agitated, began to protest. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. We're trying to maintain our community assets. Mr. Malone is—" The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, you and your crew are on private property. I've seen enough. Step aside." 3 of the men were cuffed on the spot. One had a utility knife in his back pocket. Another had bolt cutters in his tool bag. Karen tried to argue, but the officer told her she could speak to a judge. I stood with my arms crossed as the crew was walked off the property. Karen stood by the curb, arms folded, seething, but silent. Before they drove off, I leaned down and picked up the clipboard. The service order was just a printed flyer with the HOA logo slapped over my pool's photo from Google Earth, taped onto a blank spreadsheet. That's it. No permits, no licenses. No signatures, just entitlement wrapped in lamination. As the cruisers pulled away, I turned back toward my yard, the pool still glistening, untouched. The silence settled over everything like a heavy curtain. I knew what I needed to do next. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a coordinated invasion. And if Karen wanted a legal war, I was more than ready to go nuclear. By Sunday morning, I wasn't just pissed. I was mobilized. I'd spent the night going through every second of footage from my security system, cataloging the timestamps and faces. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I turned my home office into a war room with one goal in mind: burying Karen Hutchings in her own lies. First, I called my attorney, Rachel Calderon, sharp, relentless, and exactly the kind of woman you want on your side when someone's trying to annex your pool. I sent her everything: video files, the phony HOA flyers, photos of the destroyed lock, the footage of Karen's maintenance crew being cuffed on my lawn. She called me 20 minutes later, laughing darkly. "Gary," she said, "we are going to crucify them." Rachel didn't waste time. That afternoon, we filed 3 separate civil claims: criminal trespass, property damage, and defamation. The last one hit hardest. Karen had published false materials suggesting the public had legal rights to my land. That flyer, that map, the access code she distributed, that was malicious misrepresentation, and in Georgia, that's actionable. But Rachel didn't stop there. She sent a cease and desist letter to the Willow Vale HOA, naming Karen directly and warning of further litigation if their representatives made any additional statements about my property. Then she did something that made me fall in love with her a little. She subpoenaed the HOA's internal communications. Within 48 hours, we got a call from a former board member, someone who'd recently resigned after what he called Karen's crusade. He gave Rachel a thumb drive with emails, internal memos, and meeting notes. I picked it up from a diner parking lot like I was in some suburban spy thriller, and what we found was gold. There it was in writing, Karen emailing the board. "He's just one guy. If we push hard enough and get enough families to show up, he'll cave. We can redesignate the buffer zone retroactively. Just get someone to draw it up. Doesn't have to be official. Another gem. If we act like it's already shared, people will just assume it is. Let him be the bad guy, keeping kids out of a pool." There was even a draft of the flyer Karen had printed. Same logo, same phrasing, except the first version used a different photo, a Google Street View image, meaning someone had to deliberately find my house online and crop it to look like community property. Rachel called it textbook fraud with a smirk, and I agreed. Meanwhile, the HOA tried to save face. Their website posted a passive-aggressive statement distancing themselves from Karen's actions. "We understand that recent events involving the pool adjacent to Willow Vale have caused confusion. The HOA board is currently reviewing its policies regarding amenity access and community outreach." Translation: "We got caught, and now we're pretending we never knew this was happening." Too late. Karen, for her part, doubled down. She posted on Nextdoor, yes, Nextdoor, a dramatic screed about protecting neighborhood wellness and reclaiming historically accessible green space from exclusive privatization. She even called me a rogue contractor exploiting zoning ambiguity for personal gain. That got my attention. I wasn't just mad anymore, I was professionally insulted. So I responded with my own post, public, signed. Attached were my deed, my property survey, and a signed affidavit from the original owner of the house, confirming that the property had never once been affiliated with Willow Vale or any HOA. I wrote, "This isn't about a pool. It's about someone who believes they can manufacture legitimacy by shouting louder and forging paperwork. You want a community? Start by respecting boundaries." That post got shared across 4 counties. I started getting calls from local reporters. One even offered to run a feature called "When HOAs Go Too Far." I declined for now, but I knew the pressure was building. Then came the bombshell. Rachel had hired a digital forensics consultant to examine Karen's infamous HOA map, the one that labeled my backyard a shared amenity. Metadata doesn't lie. That PDF had been created 12 days prior using Photoshop, not any official mapping software. The source image, a downloaded satellite capture from Zillow's real estate platform. The map wasn't just altered, it was fabricated, start to finish. We added forgery to the list of charges. At this point, I knew Karen wasn't just a delusional bureaucrat on a power trip. She was orchestrating a targeted smear campaign. She'd weaponized a homeowner association to try and grab land that never belonged to her. And now she'd crossed into territory she couldn't Photoshop her way out of. I stood in my office that night, lights off, pool glowing softly through the windows, and I realized I wasn't defending a backyard anymore. I was building a case that was going to tear her entire little empire down. The next week turned my quiet half-acre slice of Savannah into the epicenter of a neighborhood civil war. The news had gotten out. Not just my Facebook post or the legal filings, but the forensic report Rachel leaked, strategically of course, to a local journalist with a sharp pen and zero patience for HOA drama. The article hit Monday morning under the headline, HOA president accused of forging property maps to seize private pool. By noon, I had reporters at my driveway, helicopters overhead, and a neighbor grilling me about HOA boundaries like I was a zoning attorney. I kept my gate locked and my coffee strong. Karen, on the other hand, was not so lucky. I watched her crumble in real time. First came the whispers in the Willowvale Facebook group, then the public call for her resignation. Screenshots circulated like wildfire. Her emails, the fabricated documents, even a Zoom recording from an HOA meeting where she confidently stated, "It's just an underutilized amenity. People won't care once they start using it." They cared. And they cared loudly. Parents were furious they'd let their kids swim in a pool, now confirmed to be private property. Elderly residents wrote public apologies to me. One guy offered to mow my lawn for a month. Another brought a homemade casserole and said, "I didn't know she was that kind of crazy." But just when I thought Karen might slink away quietly, she did the exact opposite. Wednesday morning, my cameras caught movement near the fence. At first, I assumed it was another curious looky-loo, but then I saw her, Karen, slinking along the hedge in a sun hat and gym clothes, like she was preparing for a Mission Impossible-style infiltration. She reached the side gate, crouched down, and began zip-tying a laminated sign to my fence. The audacity! I stepped out slowly, phone in hand, already recording. "Karen," I called. "Didn't expect to see you volunteering for community service." She froze. "Mr. Malone," she said, standing stiffly, "you are creating a hostile environment. I am simply attempting to clarify access protocols for residents who are understandably confused." "Confused because you confuse them," I replied. "And unless you're holding a court order or a subpoena, you're still trespassing." She waved a fresh flyer at me. "This is updated policy. The HOA has issued a motion to reclaim transitional easement along this boundary. You're impeding access." I nearly choked. "Karen, that flyer's worth less than the paper it's printed on. The only motion you'll be facing is one to dismiss your nonsense in court." She started to speak again, but I cut her off with one gesture, me dialing the police. When the officers arrived, same two as before, they didn't even ask questions. One of them said, "Ma'am, again?" while the other took her by the arm and gently pulled her back across the property line. No cuffs this time, but the message was clear. She wasn't untouchable anymore. The final nail came 2 days later during a Willowvale emergency meeting held in their community clubhouse. I wasn't invited, but a friend FaceTimed me from inside. Karen tried to defend herself, talking about historical access patterns and latent amenity zoning. Someone yelled back, "You made up a pool, Karen." The board voted 7-1 to suspend her indefinitely pending legal outcomes. The one vote for her? Karen herself. I wish I could say she vanished after that, but she didn't. Instead, she started going door to door with glossy printouts of her fake map, trying to gather signatures for what she called a community reclamation initiative. Most doors didn't open. A few did, and slammed right back in her face. Meanwhile, my case was moving forward. Rachel filed an additional claim for digital forgery, now backed by a full sworn statement from the forensic team. A judge accepted the preliminary evidence and granted a protective injunction. Karen was banned from coming within 50 feet of my property. The best part, her house was 60 feet from my back fence. She couldn't even see my pool anymore without breaking the law, and just like that, for the first time in weeks, I slept easy. The courthouse in Chatham County isn't exactly a dramatic building. No marble columns or towering steps, just a concrete box with too much fluorescent lighting and not enough air. But when I stepped inside that morning, briefcase in hand, it felt like stepping into the ring. Karen was already there, seated beside her attorney, a real estate specialist who looked like he'd just realized he'd backed the wrong horse. She wore a beige blazer and a tight smile, but you could see it in her eyes. The exhaustion, the panic, the simmering disbelief that her crusade had gone this far and still wasn't working. Rachel met me outside the courtroom, calm, surgical. Stay quiet unless the judge addresses you. Let her drown in her own paperwork. And drown she did. The judge, an older man with steel hair and a southern accent sharp enough to cut through lies, opened the hearing with a clear warning. This court is here to determine whether there was intentional misrepresentation of property boundaries and coordinated efforts to misuse authority. We will not entertain neighborhood politics. We deal in facts. And facts? We had them in spades. Rachel began by laying out the timeline, the construction of the pool, the false flyers, the unauthorized entry, the so-called maintenance crew, and finally the doctored map. Every point was backed by documentation, timestamps, witness statements, emails. Then came the centerpiece, the forensic report. The digital forensics expert took the stand. He explained, in excruciatingly plain language, how the HOA's map had been created using a basic graphics program, how metadata showed the file originated from Karen's laptop, and how every revision was traceable. He even pulled up the original Zillow satellite image that Karen had cropped and doctored. The courtroom was dead silent. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but it was weak. Something about community intent and non-binding drafts. The judge raised an eyebrow and replied, "Intent does not override ownership. You don't annex a man's yard with Microsoft Paint." Next, Rachel called the former HOA board member who turned whistleblower. He testified that Karen had acted unilaterally, often ignoring votes or fabricating internal resolutions without approval. He even provided an email where she wrote, "We don't need their consent, just consistency in messaging." Karen's defense attempted to pivot, to suggest there had been confusion in zoning records, that her actions were made in good faith. But Rachel shut it down with the original property survey and deed, both notarized, sealed, and filed decades ago. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. I explained how I'd purchased the home, how I'd built the pool on my land, how I'd been harassed, slandered, and invaded. I described the moment I found strangers swimming in my yard, the broken gate, the flyer stapled to my mailbox. It wasn't just about a pool, I said. It was about power, and she thought she had enough of it to take what wasn't hers. Karen didn't speak. Her attorney looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. After a short recess, the judge returned with his ruling. His voice was slow and deliberate. This court finds that Mrs. Hutchings acted beyond the scope of her authority as HOA president, and in doing so, committed acts of trespass, defamation, falsification of records, and abuse of administrative position. The plaintiff's ownership of the property and all associated structures is confirmed and protected. The fabricated materials will be entered as evidence for further prosecution. Then came the hammer. Karen was sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation and 100 hours of community service. But more importantly, she was personally liable, along with the HOA, for civil damages totaling $720,000, covering legal fees, property restoration, and reputational harm. The court also ordered a formal injunction against the Willow Vale HOA, forbidding them from referencing or interacting with my property in any future correspondence or internal policy. Karen sat still as a statue. Her mouth barely moved. No apology. Just a woman who'd bet everything on arrogance and lost it all. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "That's game." As we walked out of the courtroom, a reporter tried to stop me for a comment. I gave him a smile and said, "Private property means private." Pretty simple, really. Outside, the sun was shining, and for the first time in months, no one was trying to climb my fence. 2 months later, the only sounds in my backyard were the soft rush of water through the filtration jets and the lazy chirp of crickets warming up for their twilight chorus. My pool had never looked better. I'd repainted the concrete trim, added new string lights above the pergola, and replaced the old sign with something more appropriate. Custom engraved, black slate, gold lettering, private pool, not for HO. Trespassers will meet the deep end. I installed it with a glass of bourbon in one hand and a ratchet wrench in the other. It felt earned. Karen, meanwhile, had become something of a local legend, not the flattering kind. The HOA stripped her of her title, her name removed from all official documents like it had never been there. Rumor had it she was living with her sister in Macon now, trying to sell her Willow Vale property quietly. I doubt she gets many offers. Hard to market a home when Google auto-completes your name with the word fraud. I did hear she tried to start a blog called Civic Truth Watch, but it got taken down for violating platform terms. Apparently, impersonating public zoning officials isn't great SEO. As for me, I decided to embrace the insanity in the only way that made sense, by turning it into a monument. One Saturday, I hosted a private barbecue, just family and a few friends who'd stood by me through the whole mess. As the sun dipped low, I unveiled the newest addition to my backyard, a 6-foot-tall sculpture of a woman in a business suit, wearing a judge's robe, holding a broken HOA flyer in one hand, and sinking waist-deep into a pool, an inflatable flamingo tangled around her neck. Her face? A stylized smirk, somewhere between confident and confused. The plaque beneath read, "Karen's Lagoon, in memory of unauthorized ambition." Everyone lost it. My brother laughed so hard he dropped a rib into the pool. I think that moment, more than the lawsuits, the headlines, the cease and desists, is when it all really ended. That was the shift. The moment it stopped being about fighting back and became something simpler, a reclaimed peace. Now, on warm nights, I sit out there with a drink in hand, the underwater LEDs casting soft blue across the concrete grotto, and I smile. Not out of bitterness, not even out of triumph, but out of relief, because the fence is held, because truth won, and because Karen, bless her delusional heart, learned that no matter how many flyers you print, no matter how many committees you bully, you still can't annex a man's backyard just because you want to swim in it. Some things, after all, really are private.